1 Samuel Chapter 26. And the Ziphites came to Saul at Gibeah, saying, David is hiding himself on the hill of Hachilah, which is opposite the desert. And Saul rose up and went down to the wilderness of Ziph, with him 3,000 choice men of Israel, to seek David in the wilderness of Ziph. And Saul encamped on the hill of Hachilah, which is opposite the desert, by the road. And David remained in the wilderness, but he saw that Saul had come into the wilderness after him. And David sent spies and knew for certain that Saul had come. So David rose up and went to the place where Saul encamped. And David looked on the place where Saul and Abner the son of Nigh, the captain of his army, lay. Now Saul was lying within the entrenchment, and the people were encamped around him. And David responded and spoke to Ahimelech the Hittite and Abishai the son of Zeruiah, the brother of Joab, saying, Who will go down with me to Saul at the camp? And Abishai said, I will go down with you. So David and Abishai went to the people by night, and there lay Saul, sleeping within the entrenchment, and his spear was stuck in the ground by his head. And Abner and the people lay around him. And Abishai said to David, God has delivered your enemy into your hand today. Now therefore let me strike him with the spear even to the ground with one stroke, and I will not do it twice. But David said to Abishai, Do not destroy him, for who can stretch out his hand against Jehovah's anointed and be guiltless? And David said, As Jehovah lives, Jehovah will strike him down, or his day will come to die, or he will go down in battle and perish. Jehovah forbid that I should stretch out my hand against Jehovah's anointed. Now therefore take the spear that is by his head and the water jug, and let us go. So David took the spear and the water jug by Saul's head, and they went away. And no one saw it or knew about it, nor did anyone awake, for all of them were sleeping, for a deep sleep from Jehovah had fallen upon them. And David crossed over to the other side and stood on the top of the hill far off, a great distance was between them. And David called out to the people and to Abner the son of Nigh, saying, Will you not answer, Abner? And Abner answered and said, Who are you that calls out to the king? And David said to Abner, Are you not a man? Who is like you in Israel? Why then have you not guarded your lord the king? For one of the people came in to destroy the king your lord. This thing is not good that you have done. As Jehovah lives, you are as good as dead because you did not guard your lord, Jehovah's anointed. Now therefore, see where the king's spear and the water jug that were by his head are. And Saul recognized David's voice, and he said, Is this your voice, my son David? And David said, It is my voice, my lord, O king. And he said, Why does my lord pursue after his servant? For what have I done? Or what evil is in my hand? Now therefore let my lord the king hear the words of his servant. If it is Jehovah who has stirred you up against me, let him accept an offering, but if it is the sons of men, let them be cursed before Jehovah, for they have driven me out today, so that I cannot share in Jehovah's inheritance, saying, Go, serve other gods. Now therefore do not let my blood fall to the ground apart from the presence of Jehovah, for the king of Israel has come forth to seek a single flea, as one might hunt a partridge in the mountains. And Saul said, I have sinned. Return, my son David, for I will not harm you any more, because my life was precious in your sight this day. I have indeed acted foolishly and have made a very great mistake. And David answered and said, Here is the spear, O king. Let one of the young men cross over and get it. And Jehovah will repay to each man his righteousness and faithfulness, because Jehovah has delivered you into my hand today, and I would not stretch out my hand against Jehovah's anointed. Then just as great as your life was in my eyes this day, so great may my life be in Jehovah's eyes that he would deliver me from all distress. And Saul said to David, Blessed are you, my son David. You shall most certainly both do and prevail. And David went on his way, and Saul returned to his place. 1 Samuel Chapter 27. And David said in his heart, I will now one day perish at the hand of Saul. There is nothing better for me than to escape into the land of the Philistines, then Saul will despair of seeking me any longer within all the territory of Israel. Thus I will escape from his hand. So David rose up and crossed over, he and the 600 men who were with him, to Achish the son of Mauch, the king of Gath. And David and his men remained with Achish in Gath, he and his men, each man with his household, David and his 2 wives, Ahinoam the Jezreelite and Abigail the wife of Nabal, the Carmelite. And it was told Saul that David had fled to Gath, so he no longer sought him. And David said to Achish, If now I have found favor in your sight, let me be given a place in one of the country towns, and I will dwell there. For why should your servant dwell in the royal city with you? So Achish gave him Ziklag that day, therefore Ziklag belongs to the kings of Judah to this day. And the length of time that David remained in the country of the Philistines was 1 year and 4 months. Now David and his men went up and attacked the Geshurites and the Girzites and the Amalekites, for they were the inhabitants of the land from of old, as you go to Shur and unto the land of Egypt. And David struck the land, and he left neither man nor woman alive, but took the sheep and the oxen and the asses and the camels and the clothing. Then he returned and came to Achish. Then Achish said, Against whom have you conducted an attack today? And David said, Against the south of Judah and against the south of the Jerahmeelites and against the south of the Kenites. Now David left neither man nor woman alive to be brought to Gath, for he said, Perhaps they will tell of us, saying, Thus did David do. And such was his custom as long as he dwelt in the country of the Philistines. And Achish trusted David, saying, He has made himself utterly odious to his people Israel, therefore he shall be my servant forever. 1 Samuel Chapter 28. Then in those days the Philistines gathered their camps together for war to fight against Israel. And Achish said to David, Know assuredly that you shall go out with me into the camp, you and your men. And David said to Achish, This being so, you will know what your servant can do. And Achish said to David, Therefore I will make you my bodyguard for life. Now Samuel was dead, and all Israel had mourned for him, and they had buried him in Ramah, that is, in his own city. And Saul had the mediums and the soothsayers put out of the land. And the Philistines gathered together, and they came and encamped in Shunem, and Saul gathered all Israel together, and they encamped in Gilboa. And when Saul saw the camp of the Philistines, he was afraid, and his heart trembled greatly. And Saul inquired of Jehovah, but Jehovah did not answer him, not by dreams or by the Urim or by the prophets. Then said Saul to his servants, Seek for me a woman who is a medium that I may go to her and inquire of her. And his servants said to him, There is now a woman who is a medium at Endor. Then Saul disguised himself and put on other clothes. And he and 2 men with him went, and they came to the woman by night. And he said, Consult a departed spirit for me, and bring up to me the one whom I tell you. But the woman said to him, Look, you know what Saul has done, that he has cut off the mediums and the soothsayers from the land. Why then do you lay a snare for my life to make me die? Then Saul swore to her by Jehovah, saying, As Jehovah lives, no punishment shall happen to you for this thing. So the woman said, Whom shall I bring up to you? And he said, Bring up Samuel to me. Now when the woman saw Samuel, she cried out with a loud voice, and the woman spoke to Saul, saying, Why have you deceived me? For you are Saul. And the king said to her, Do not be afraid. But what do you see? And the woman said to Saul, I see some divine being coming up out of the earth. And he said to her, What is his appearance? And she said, An old man is coming up, and he is wrapped in a cloak. Then Saul knew that it was Samuel, and he bowed with his face to the ground and paid him homage. And Samuel said to Saul, "Why have you disturbed me by bringing me up?" And Saul said, "I am greatly distressed, for the Philistines wage war against me, and God has turned away from me and answers me no more, neither through the prophets nor by dreams. Therefore I have called you, that you may make known to me what I shall do." And Samuel said, "Why then have you inquired of me? For Jehovah has turned away from you and become your adversary. And Jehovah has done for himself just as he spoke through me, for Jehovah has torn the kingdom out from your hand and given it to an associate of yours, to David. Because you did not listen to the voice of Jehovah and did not execute his burning anger upon the Amalekites, therefore Jehovah has done this thing to you this day. And Jehovah will also give Israel with you into the hand of the Philistines, and tomorrow you and your sons will be with me. Jehovah will also give the camp of Israel into the hand of the Philistines." Then immediately Saul fell his full length to the ground, and he was very afraid because of Samuel's words. And there was no strength in him, for he had not eaten food all day and all night. And the woman came to Saul and saw that he was very troubled. And she said to him, "Indeed, your servant has listened to your voice, and I have put my life in my hand and have listened to your words which you spoke to me. Now therefore, you listen also to the voice of your servant, and let me set a morsel of bread before you, and eat, that you may have strength when you go on your way." But he refused and said, "I will not eat." Then his servants, as well as the woman, compelled him, and he listened to their voice, and he rose up from the ground and sat on the bed. And the woman had a fattened calf in the house, and she hurried and killed it, and took flour and kneaded it, and baked unleavened bread with it. And she brought it before Saul and his servants, and they ate. And they rose up and went away that night.